Lord. I pray, Lord, that you would just bless the study, that your word would be going out, Lord, that you'd speak through me, that I wouldn't be distracting, Lord. I pray, Lord, you touch hearts and you soften our hearts, and if there's anyone listening or here right now, Lord, I pray you just touch that they need to receive you. I pray you bring them to salvation today, Lord. And I just pray for me. I ask, Lord, that you please help me to have clarity of mind and clarity of speech, and that you would just work through me right now, but that I wouldn't be distracting at all. Through in Jesus, Father. Amen. All right, so yeah, open up your Bible to 2 Samuel chapter 18, verse 19. I'll get you caught up if you're not caught up as of right now. Um, Basically, last week we saw the culmination of this civil war that had been unfolding. King David, he was the king of Israel. However, his son Absalom was rebelling against him. And we've seen this for the last, since 17 or chapter 16, we've been watching this unfold. And so it came to the point where Absalom had driven David out of Jerusalem, the capital city. David crossed the Jordan. He headed east and went out into the wilderness, into the woods of Ephraim. And so last week we see Absalom actually go after him and make battle against him in the woods of Ephraim. And this was the one defining moment in that whole rebellion for Absalom. Unfortunately, it didn't go very well for him. We saw that the terrain was just a terrible place to try to attack someone on. The woods actually killed more people than the sword did that day. We saw that the total dead were 20,000. We're not sure how many on each side, but Absalom's side lost. And Absalom came upon the servants of David, and he tried to hightail it out of there. He got on his mule, and he was riding very quickly, or I assume he was riding very quickly through the countryside there, and he got his hair caught in the low-lying branch of a terebinth tree. And I didn't really go over this last week. There's some people that thought maybe he just actually got caught in the crook of a branch and maybe broke his neck, and that's why he was still hanging there when they came upon him, paralyzed. One way or the other, the mule kept going. Absalom stayed put. And so a servant of David saw it, and he went and told Joab, Absalom, he's there, he's caught. And so Joab took 3 darts, 3 spears, and he threw them into Absalom's heart. Despite David's clear instructions not to kill his son, he said, for my sake, do not harm Absalom. Joab heard it, but he went and killed him anyways. Although it seems like his armor bearers were the ones that struck the final blows on Absalom. They threw his body into a pit, covered it with stones. They blew the trumpets, signifying, hey, Absalom is dead. The battle's over. And this also let Absalom's forces know, hey, it is time for us to get out of here. They made their way to their tents, but Joab held back his troops from pursuing them further. And so that's where we pick it up today. We're actually going to begin in verse 19 and look at how Joab goes about choosing who to send with the news about what had happened on the battlefield. So I want to start reading right there. It says, Then Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok, said, and he's speaking to Joab, Let me run now and take the news to the king, how the Lord has avenged him of his enemies. And Joab said to him, You shall not take the news this day, for you shall take the news another day, but today you shall take no news, because the king's son is dead. Then Joab said to the Cushite, this is another man, Go, tell the king what you have seen. So the Cushite bowed himself to Joab and ran. And Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok, said again to Joab, But whatever happens, please let me also run after the Cushite. So Joab said, Why will you run, my son, since you have no news ready? But whatever happens, he said, let me run. So Joab said to him, Run. Then Ahimaaz ran by way of the plain and outran the Cushite. So now that Absalom has been killed, the trumpets have been blown, effectively ending the battle. Now news needs to be brought to David about what happened. Remember, David, he wanted to go out into the battle, but the people said, no, 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 no. Do not go out, because once they see you, they're going to swarm you. You're the only person they want to kill, David. So he yielded to their wishes, and he stayed in the gates of the city. And the Bible, it gives us dialogue here and insight into Joab's decision making about who to send. It kind of seems, I don't want to say that this seems random, because there's nothing random included in the Bible. It's all there for a reason. But this almost seems like it's bonus information for us, a little peek behind the curtain, this dialogue that's going on here about who to send with the news to David. And as you can imagine, this was probably taking place in front of a crowd of people. They weren't in a private area. They were in the woods. You would imagine soldiers are starting to rally to where the trumpets are being blown. There's probably people milling around, lots of people witnessing this conversation going on. And this isn't the first time that we've seen Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok. He appeared, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, back in chapter 17, as one of the messengers sent by Hushai with information regarding what was going on in Absalom's inner circle. Actually, Ahimaaz and a young man named Jonathan were the messengers that Hushai was using. Remember, Hushai had actually gained Absalom's confidence, although he was still loyal to his father David. So he was sending back this information to David. Hey, this is what's going on. You're in danger, you should probably leave. And this was the message that they brought, that this guy Ahimaaz had brought, and he actually had to hide out in the bottom of a well for a while because there were people after him, trying to capture him. So, it seems like this guy is a skilled messenger. We see him doing it previously in the chapters before. He's right here, and it seems like this line of work seems to be his forte. So in Ahimaaz's mind, he's the logical choice for the job. Well, let me go, David, or let me go, Joab. Let me bring the news. But Joab resists the idea of sending Ahimaaz. And at first I was trying to think of why Joab might have done this. And maybe I was getting a little too creative in my head or whatever. I was thinking, well, maybe Joab, he's afraid what Ahimaaz might say. Maybe Ahimaaz might narc him out for killing Absalom, Joab is afraid of that. Or maybe Joab sees this Ahimaaz as a rising star and he doesn't want to share the spotlight or something like that. And then I realized, hey, the answer is actually right in front of my nose, right here in the Word. Joab says to him, you shall take no news this day, for you shall take news another day, but today you shall take no news. Why? Because the king's son is dead. You see, Joab understands that even though the battle has been won, this is not going to be good news that's brought to David. So what we have here is we actually have Joab trying to select the right messenger to match the nature of the news. Ahimaaz was a good man. He was someone that David liked. And as we'll see, he's someone that David's going to assume is going to bring good news. And so we actually see Joab here acting in kind of a thoughtful way, in the same manner that if you had a close friend who had just lost a loved one, you wouldn't send them a condolence card that played some corny tune that when they open it up, you would act in more of a thoughtful way. And this is what Joab's doing here. He selects an unnamed Cushite, or at least unnamed to us, someone who was from the area around southern Egypt, present-day Sudan in Africa. Kind of shows you just how far, or just how much these kingdoms at the time were intertwined. Kind of shows you just how broad David actually drew support from, getting people from Africa in his army, even though it might just be one. I kind of think to myself, it's interesting, maybe this guy's that precursor, one of those first guys that's paving the way for the Queen of Sheba to come during Solomon's lifetime when he was king. Maybe he's one of those guys bringing back word about what's going on in Israel at this time. Kind of interesting to think about. But it seems like this guy is loyal to David, and I assume that he's been running messages for Joab at the same time. So he selects this guy to bring the news. But Ahimaaz, he's not taking no for an answer, even though he becomes aware that this isn't going to be good news. On 2 occasions he says, but whatever happens, please let me also run. So Joab relented, and it appears that Ahimaaz was either a fast runner or he seemed at least to have known the terrain better because he went by the way of the plain and reached David first, despite the other guy having a head start. Now David was sitting between the two gates, and the watchman went up to the roof over the gate to the wall and lifted up his eyes and looked. And there was a man running alone. And the watchman cried out and told the king. And the king said, "If he is alone, there is news in his mouth." And he came rapidly and drew near. Then the watchman, he looked up and he saw another man running. And the watchman called out to the gatekeeper and said, "There is another man running alone." And the king said, "He also brings news." So the watchman said, "I think the running of the first is like the running of Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok." And the king said, "He is a good man and comes with good news." So if you ever wondered how a cell phone worked in ancient times, this is it. Micah, you're getting a text message? It looks like it's going to be good news. You know what I mean? Like, we'll have to wait another 10 minutes before it comes in. Oh, wait, you're getting two. You know what I mean? Like, but this is the process they set up. I can only imagine those 5-10 minutes after they saw that guy round the bend or come up over the horizon. Maybe that might have been excruciating time to wait. King David, he assumes that because Ahimaaz is bearing the message and because he's a good man, he's going to be pleased with what he's going to hear, and that's exactly what Joab was trying to avoid here. Kind of interesting, one commentator mentioned that messages borne by single messengers back at this time typically were good news, or at least they weren't terrible news. Now, I haven't went back and actually applied this concept to see if it was how true it was, looking at historical references or the Bible. But in theory, I understand how it works. If you looked out and you saw a single runner coming from the battle, then you were okay. If you looked out and you saw hundreds of soldiers running from the battle, then you probably knew right away it was bad news. A single messenger implied that there was some semblance of things still being kept together. Things were still okay at the battlefield. So Ahimaaz called out and said to the king, "All is well." And he bowed down with his face to the earth before the king and said, "Blessed be the Lord your God, who has delivered up the men who raised their hand against my lord the king." The king said, "Is the young man Absalom safe?" Ahimaaz answered, "When Joab sent the king's servant and me, your servant, I saw a great tumult, but I did not know what it was about." And the king said, "Turn aside and stand here." So he turned aside and stood still. So David gets right to the point. "How is my son?" And Ahimaaz, for as good of a messenger as he seemed, he completely dodges this question. I mean, we could see back in verse 20, Joab tells him, "But today you shall take no news." Why? Because the king's son is dead. Ahimaaz, "How is my son?" "Ooh, I saw something going on, but I wasn't sure what was really." I mean, he feigns ignorance, and he dodges the question. However, at this time, the Cushite messenger arrives. Just then the Cushite came, and the Cushite said, "There is good news, my lord, the king, for the Lord has avenged you this day of all those who rose against you." And the king said to the Cushite, "Is the young man Absalom safe?" So the Cushite answered, "May the enemies of my lord the king and all who rise up against you to do harm be like that young man." Ooh, this was not what David was wanting to hear. And unlike Ahimaaz, who was reluctant to tell David of his son's death, this man from Cush, he has no qualms. He blurts it out. He blurts it out eloquently. Perhaps being a messenger, he missed David's instructions when he told the whole body of Israel, "Don't kill my son." But the word says that all of Israel heard. So I assume this messenger heard as well. I don't know why he said it like this. One way or another, though, this breaks David's heart, and it would be interesting, though, to see this messenger from Cush's face when he said it, expecting, cheers and huzzahs and stuff, and just to see David go, "Oh," I bet you this guy thought he he was going to get killed or something like that, he probably thought, oh no, I said the wrong thing right now. But to the credit of both of these messengers, they give God glory for the victory. Ahimaaz declared, "Blessed be the Lord your God, who has delivered up the men who raised their hand against my lord the king." The man from Cush proclaimed, "There is good news, my lord the king, for the Lord has avenged you this day of all those who rose up against you." It's the first thing that comes out of their mouths. So something for us to be thinking about is, how do we give glory to God for things going on in our lives? How do we represent this to people that we come across at work, or just we may know from who knows where they might know that we have been looking for a car or a job or a house, and they ask about it. And do you say, hey, it was answered prayer? And then you could tell them exactly why, praise. You could say whatever you want, but if you put it in context of praising God, that might start ringing some bells in their head. It might start planting some seeds. And you're giving God the glory. Something to be thinking about. Then the king was deeply moved and went up to the chamber over the gate and wept. And as he went, he said thus, "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died in your place, O Absalom, my son." Let's continue through 19 here. And Joab was told, "Behold, the king is weeping and mourning for Absalom." So the victory that day was turned into mourning for all the people. For the people heard it said that day, "The king is grieved for his son." And the people, David's servants, his soldiers, the people stole back into the city that day as people who are ashamed steal away when they flee in battle. But the king covered his face, and the king cried out with a loud voice, "Oh, my son, Absalom! Oh, Absalom, my son, my son!" So we're going to go over David's grief in just a moment. I just want to mention, though, there's a line of thought that is with us today, that the concept of an afterlife is not really established in the Old Testament. That is more of a New Testament doctrine brought on and expounded upon by Jesus Christ. And this line of thought is not true. Beginning with Enoch in the Old Testament. In Genesis, we can find proof of an afterlife. We can find proof of the expectation of an afterlife on the part of believers throughout the Old Testament. And I played with the idea of doing a mini study on that here, but I'm not going to. Maybe that's something that would be interesting for you to do over a cup of coffee or something like that one day if you want to get into the Word in that manner. But the reason why I bring it up here is that I believe that David's response to Absalom's death is another reminder about eternal life after death in the Old Testament here. And this one is a sobering reminder. You see, Absalom, he was not the first son that David has lost. Back in 2 Samuel 12, verse 15, it says, and this is when David has had illicit relations with Bathsheba, who was married to another man, Uriah. Once David couldn't wiggle out of what had happened because she became pregnant, he actually had Uriah killed on the battlefield. And so Nathan the prophet has come to David and told him, "Hey, because you've done this, these things are going to happen to you." One of them was that this child that Bathsheba is going to bear is going to pass away. And so we pick it up here in chapter 12. It says, "And the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife bore to David, and it became ill. David therefore pleaded with God for the child, and David fasted and went in and lay all night on the ground. So the elders of the house arose and went to him to raise him up from the ground. But he would not, nor did he eat food with them. Then on the seventh day it came to pass that the child died. And the servants of David were afraid to tell him that the child was dead. For they said, 'Indeed, while the child was alive, we spoke with him, and he would not heed our voice. How can we tell him that the child is dead? He may do some harm.' When David saw that his servants were whispering, David perceived that the child was dead. Therefore David said to his servants, Is the child dead? And they said, He is dead. So David arose from the ground. He washed and anointed himself and changed his clothes. And then he went into the house of the Lord and worshipped. Then he went into his own house, and when he requested, they set food before him, and he ate. Then his servants said to him, What is this that you have done? You fasted and wept for the child while he was alive. But when the child died, you arose and ate food. And David said, While the child was alive, I fasted and wept, for I said, Who can tell whether the Lord will be gracious to me, that the child may live? But now he is dead. Why should I fast? I shall go to him, but he shall not return to me. Two things here. First, David has no reason to mourn for this child's eternal well-being. Although we're born into sin, although we have a sinful nature, David knew that God would not impute sin on this newborn. God had simply taken the child home. Therefore David answered, Why should I fast? I shall go to him, but he shall not return to me. Absalom, however, he died in the midst of sin. He died soaking wet in sin. Coveting power, trying to kill his father, to the extent that he was willing to risk this war. He was proud, he was arrogant, he was unruly. 2 Samuel chapter 17, verse 14 tells us, For the Lord had purposed to defeat the good advice of Ahithophel to the intent that the Lord might bring disaster on Absalom. Now you might say, well, that's not very nice of God. Absalom doesn't stand a chance. If that's the case, that's not very nice of him. But Psalm chapter 7, beginning in verse 8 says, The Lord shall judge the peoples. Judge me, O Lord, according to my righteousness and according to my integrity within me. O let the wickedness of the wicked come to an end, but establish the just. For the righteous God tests the hearts and minds. My defense is of God who saves the upright in heart. God is a just judge, and God is angry with the wicked every day. If the wicked does not turn back, he will sharpen his sword. God will sharpen his sword. He bends his bow and makes it ready. He also prepares for himself instruments of death. He makes his arrows into fiery shafts. Behold, and think of Absalom here. The wicked brings forth iniquity. Yes, he conceives trouble and brings forth falsehood. He made a pit and dug it out, and has fallen into the ditch which he made. His trouble shall return upon his own head, and his violent dealing shall come down on his own crown. I will praise the Lord according to his righteousness, and I will sing praise to the name of the Lord Most High. Now you say to yourself, did David understand these principles? Absolutely he did. He's the one who wrote them. Interestingly enough, this psalm was written by David regarding the words of a man named Cush. You see, though, David understood that the sins and the deeds of Absalom had come down upon his own head, and that God, being a righteous and just judge, rendered a fair verdict regarding Absalom. But as a father, this must have broken his heart. You see, unlike the newborn who died in a state of grace, Absalom died soaked in sin, and it was too late for him now. We can do two things with our sin. We can ignore our sin, we can hide it, we can try to justify it, we can make a 5-step plan to improve ourselves as individuals. We can continue to live on in our sin, to be trapped by it and to be defined by it. Or we could give it to God and ask this righteous judge to forgive us. In Romans 6, verse 20, it says, For when you were slaves of sin, you were free in regard to righteousness. What fruit did you have then in the things of which you are now ashamed? For the end of those things is death. But now having been set free from sin having become slaves to God. You have your fruit to holiness, and the end, everlasting life. For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life in Jesus Christ our Lord. So you might ask yourself, how does this work for me? In John 3:14 it says, "And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved." So it is too late for Absalom, but it is not too late for you. Now, the second thing about David's grief here is that I believe that it stems from having not been that proper mentor to Absalom. Sure, David was a godly man, but we don't see him training up his children to also be godly men and women. You know, going back to the newborn who died in chapter 12, David pleaded with God for that kid. He fasted. He lay on the ground throughout the night. You know, he said, while the child was alive, I fasted and wept, for I said, who can tell whether the Lord will be gracious to me, that the child may live? David did everything he could to try to benefit this child while it was alive, but we can't say that he did the same for Absalom. And what I mean by this is that it simply isn't recorded in the Bible. I mean, with exception to Solomon, I really can't think of any spiritual instruction being given from David to his children. So for those of you who have children right now, understand you have an incredible ministry. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." So maybe your children, though, are out of the house. Maybe they've grown, they've flown the coop. And perhaps you weren't the best example as a parent. Maybe you were living in sin. Maybe you were a hypocrite. Maybe you were just spiritually apathetic. You still have an incredible ministry. Maybe you're in a position to witness to your child, since they, of all people, will be able to identify the changes that God has made in your life. Maybe you're in a position to apologize to your child. If either of these are the case, then I just suggest that you bathe it in prayer before you do it. Let me ask you this, though. So long as your child still has life, what's stopping you from going to God daily and pleading for that child's salvation? One way or another, don't put it off, because we're prone to think that our loved ones will always be with us. But we don't ever know what tomorrow brings. So here we have David, and he's very upset, and he doesn't hide it. His display has an effect on the people, as verse 2 in chapter 19 says, "So the victory that day was turned into mourning for all the people." They actually begin to behave as they should be behaving as victors, as people who have just won a battle. They were strong, they were bold, they defended David's life. They're having to slink back into the city as if they had fled the battle. They're so ashamed of it. So keep in mind that although David has every right to mourn for the dead, he still has a greater responsibility towards the living here. These people had risked their life in battle and succeeded, but David's behavior is making them feel ashamed. Then Joab came into the house to the king and said, "I'm sorry that your son is dead. I shouldn't have killed him. Let's proclaim a week of mourning." No, wait, that's not what he says. That's not what Joab's going to say. So Joab came into the house to the king and said, "Today you have disgraced all your servants who today have saved your life, David. The lives of your sons and daughters, the lives of your wives, and the lives of your concubines, in that you love your enemies and hate your friends. For you have declared today that you regard neither princes nor servants. For today I perceive that if Absalom would have lived and all of us had died today, then it would have pleased you well. Now therefore, arise, go out and speak comfort to your servants. For I swear by the Lord, if you do not go out, not one will stay with you this night. And that will be worse for you than all the evil that has befallen you from your youth until now. Then the king arose and sat in the gate, and all the people, and they told all the people, saying, There is the king sitting in the gate. So all the people came before the king, for everyone of Israel had fled to his tent. You know, we can say many things about Joab. We can say many things about Joab. He's ruthless. He has a mean streak. He's insensitive. He makes messes of things. But he was fiercely loyal to David. And that's what makes him such a complex character in the Bible here. Back in chapter 14, it was actually Joab who had arranged to bring Absalom back from exile when Absalom had killed his brother for raping his sister. Joab saw that David missed Absalom so much that Joab arranged for Absalom to be brought back, even though Joab, being Joab, used deceit to do it. In chapter 18, by chapter 18, things had changed, and Absalom had been revealed to be a truly bad apple. And Joab understood that it was 100% in David's best interest for Absalom to be put to death as he dangled from that tree. So he killed him. However, he did so against David's explicit orders not to. Interesting guy. In verse 16 of chapter 18, we see that Joab blew the trumpet once Absalom was dead. It said, For Joab held back the people, meaning that Joab kept his soldiers from killing hundreds or thousands more of the rebellious Israelites. So while Joab may have been unruly, probably not the type of guy you want to be your vice president if you're the president, he wasn't bloodthirsty, and he always had David's back. And we're going to see some more interesting things that might complicate the picture further as we go on in a couple chapters. But that's Joab up to this point. I think his motto would be, the end justifies the means. But that's not scriptural. That could get you in trouble. That could get you into sin. So be aware of that. And we're going to see that happen to Joab too. So here we have Joab, fresh off of killing David's son, telling David to buck up, be a man. It's incredibly insensitive, but it's exactly what David needs to hear at this point. He has alienated his supporters, and Joab tells him so. And he even points out, today you have disgraced your servants who have saved your lives, the lives of your sons and daughters. Think about that. Understand that custom in the Orient, in the Middle East at this time, dictated that naturally, if Absalom were to have won the battle and became the next king, he would have put to death the rest of David's sons. So it's almost like, do you choose one or do you lose them all? That's what Joab's saying here. If this man actually would have succeeded, he would have killed everyone you loved, David. Understand that. So we're going to shift gears a bit here. And I'm going to wrap it up as well. But I want to get a little bit further. So let's shift gears here in 2 Samuel chapter 19, beginning in verse 9. We're looking a bit more at the big picture here after the battle has happened. Understand that over these next couple of verses, David has not returned yet to Jerusalem to pick up the crown as king. It doesn't say exactly if he stays in Ephraim or if he moves, but he has not returned to Jerusalem as king at this point. And it says, now all the people were in a dispute throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, the king saved us from the hand of our enemies. He delivered us from the hand of the Philistines. And now he has fled from the land because Absalom. But Absalom, who we anointed over us, has died in battle. Now therefore, why do you say nothing about bringing back the king? I like the way the King James Version phrases the beginning of verse 9. It says, all the people were at strife throughout Israel. Or all the people were at strife throughout all the tribes of Israel. There is some bickering going on. There's some confusion going on. The same type that might go on when two groups of people or two people have been divided over an issue. There's two different camps. Some might have remained loyal to David. Some may have decided to follow Absalom. It's very much a political divide. And now that Absalom is dead, there can be some fallout from it. And understand that David does not immediately return to Jerusalem after the battle. So here's what the people are saying. They're saying, David saved us from our enemies. He saved us from the Philistines. David was good for us. But he fled Absalom. We anointed Absalom as our king. Absalom is dead. What are we doing about bringing David back right now? That's kind of what's going on in these verses. Now notice as we go into 11 right here, what is specifically written in this next verse. It says, so King David sent to Zadok and Abiathar the priests, saying, speak to the elders of Judah. Okay, remember that. Speak to the elders of Judah, saying, why are you the last to bring the king back to his house, since the words of all Israel have come to the king to his very house? You might ask yourself why David singles out the tribe Judah here, or why they were the last to reach out to the king for reinstatement. Understand that Absalom's rebellion had its roots in Judah, okay? This is where the majority of the groundswell of his support comes. Absalom actually marches on Jerusalem from Hebron, which is one of Judah's primary cities. Judah seems to have been the most unloyal tribe to David, and perhaps they have the most to fear from his return. I'm going to stop right there. And what we're going to see next week is we're going to see David playing some politics. We're going to see some things, and be praying for me too, because as I'm going through, I'm thinking to myself, is this good? Is this bad? I don't know. We're going to be seeing David doing some things without consulting the Lord before he does them. And then we're going to see David actually come back to Jerusalem as the king. So something interesting there. Let's pray. Father, I just thank you so much, Lord, for your word. I thank you for my brothers and sisters here, Lord. I pray that you just be going before us and with us in our endeavors over this weekend, and as we end this week, Lord, that you'd bless us and keep us safe, Lord. And I pray, Lord, that we would just keep you in our minds, Lord, be reading your word, and I pray that we would just be giving you glory to others for what you have done for us, Father. And if there's someone listening right now who has not received Jesus as their Savior, I just encourage you to ask Christ to come into your life, to forgive your sins, and realize that you're saved because of his sacrifice on the cross and resurrection. So, Father, I just thank you so much for how much you love us, and I pray that you go with us as we leave here tonight. And they all said,